I'll get to your Sunday NFL free picks in just a moment. Among them, the night game between the Packers and the Falcons promises to be one of the best games on this Sunday card. But first, we've got to talk boxing. In Saturday's video report, I broke down how I thought the Triple G Alvarez fight would play out. And I told you that I thought the best bet was clearly going to be Alvarez. I told you the fight would go the distance. I told you to go ahead and bet Alvarez, as I did, plus $1.30. And I'm telling you right now, I was wrong, because Triple G won that fight. But thankfully, because you had a judge that clearly was not wearing her glasses, clearly had turned in her fight card before the fight was even played out. Clearly, we got a gift from the gambling gods and walked away with the draw and didn't lose money in a fight that we clearly should have lost money, because that was a travesty last night, as once again boxing shot itself in the foot. You know, as a reporter in what I like to call my previous life, in an 8-year stretch, there was not a major bout that I did not cover as a reporter. In an 8-year stretch in the late 80s and early 90s, every single major bout I covered. And there were some good ones, there were some bad ones, there were some mediocre ones. And of course, as a kid growing up, I'm a huge boxing fan. And if I could leave this career today and go back to being a reporter, forget about general sports, I would go back and cover boxing full time. That is the thing that I love more than anything else. That was a travesty last night. That's all I can tell you. You know, boxing had a chance to once again recapture everybody's attention, because after the money grab, after the spectacle, after the circus and the clown fight, well, we can't even call it a fight, between McGregor and Mayweather from a few weeks ago, you still had the public's attention. And you had what promised to be a great fight last night. And trust me, it was a great fight. And if you saw it, it was all that you could ask for. Listen, you're always going to have your best bouts in the welterweights, the junior middleweights, the middleweights, because you're always going to have action, because you have athletes. You don't have lumbering heavyweights that only fight 30 seconds for every 3 minutes. No, you're always going to have end-to-end action, round-to-round action for 12 rounds. That's what you're going to get. And you had that last night. But what you didn't have was competent judging. And that's a problem that you've always had in boxing. But what you had last night took it one step further, because Adelaide Byrd just made a mockery of that fight with the card that she turned in. Now, she had 441 professional judgings before that fight last night. And I'm sure that she was a competent judge in many of those 441 bouts. But clearly, she was not judging that fight like the rest of us was watching that fight last night, because Triple G won that fight. Listen, his jab was just so dominant last night. As I said yesterday coming into that fight, you know, he has a heavy-handed jab, and that thing inflicted power. And, you know, I thought that he had slipped some after the Jacobs fight prior coming into this one, and I thought that Alvarez would be able to counterpunch off that jab. But what I saw last night, that Alvarez was reluctant to wade into that jab to inflict some damage. He was reluctant until the last 3 rounds, and really in the first 2 rounds, that's where he did most of his damage early. In between, he was reluctant to work his way inside that jab to do any damage. And Triple G just used it repeatedly and accrued enough points, I thought, to easily win that fight. Now, when I say easily, he did not win that fight by 7 or 8 rounds. But then again, Byrd had Alvarez winning that fight by an overwhelming margin. That fight did not deserve to be a draw. It deserved to be a decision in favor of Triple G. So what we are going to get is round 2. But that's the problem with boxing. Listen, you have corrupt organizations with the WBC, the IBF, the WBA over the year. You never know what you have. You have corrupt promoters. It's the problem with boxing from the day they invented the sport. And you're always going to have judging issues as well. And I don't know if there's a solution, but I'll tell you what, then after the fight late last night, you had Bob Bennett, the executive director of the Nevada Athletic Commission. This is what he said. He said, and I'm quoting, he said that this judge, Adelaide Byrd, needed a, quote, small break, unquote, from big fights after turning in her scorecard. A small break? She needed a permanent vacation. She needs to be exiled. She needs to be barred from ever judging another fight. And this is what he said. And he goes on to say, I'm not going to put her right back in. and this is a direct quote, she'll still be in the business, but she needs to catch her breath. Seriously. I mean, what drugs is this guy doing? I mean, what fight did he watch last night? I mean, that is a travesty, a mockery. Any other word you want to choose should never be allowed to judge a dime store bout. I mean, what does he think? Was he was watching the movie Fight Club last night? It was a joke. Anyway, let's get to football here tonight. Let's start with this game between the Falcons and the Packers. I think the biggest issue that you always have to remember in week number 2 is that you can't put too much stock into week number 1. And I've talked about this in previous video reports earlier in this week. What happens in week number 1 is that you have teams that don't play like they should because they didn't participate in the preseason, because nobody played in the preseason, because you had 4 worthless weeks where nobody played in terms of starters. You didn't have that chemistry developed that should have, because practice is not like playing in the preseason. And you had teams like the Falcons who really laid an egg at Chicago offensively and really didn't have their mojo going. Now the Falcons are at home tonight. They're debuting in their brand new Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which if you're going to have a high-priced, fancy-dancy brand new stadium, it might as well be sponsored by Mercedes-Benz, right? I mean, isn't that an appropriate name? Anyway, I digress. The Falcons, of course, won both meetings last year. The first one was a back-and-forth game where they failed to cover. They won that regular season meeting 33-32. I remember it very well because it cost me money. However, they did take revenge in the rematch in the NFC title game, winning easily 44-21. Everybody will say in that game the Packers secondary was beaten up and Matt Ryan took advantage of them. Yes, but listen, it wasn't just because the Packers were missing 3 key contributors in the secondary. The Packers just simply weren't that good, and the Falcons at that stage of the season were far superior. That's the Falcons team I expect to see here today, not the Falcons team that didn't really play in sync. And no, I don't expect the boy band to show up. Didn't play in sync at Chicago last week. I expect the Falcons to really start playing well here today offensively and come out and strike this Green Bay defense. Now, people will say, hey, Al, Green Bay really played well last week at home against Seattle. Yeah, I know. I gave you the Packers as a free pick over Seattle last Sunday in the video report. And what did I tell you? I didn't think Seattle was any good. I still don't think Seattle was any good. Russell Wilson, 14 for 27, 158 yards. Seattle was outgained 370 to 225. Seattle only had 12 first downs in that game. Seattle isn't that good. Not as good defensively as in previous years. Certainly not that good offensively either. Packers had a nice, easy time of it. And after all was said and done, Packers won the game. Was it a convincing win? Yeah. Was it an impressive win? No. I was more impressed with the fact that the Falcons, despite not being in sync, got the job done at Chicago. Coming back at home now, because the Falcons were not impressive at Chicago, we're getting a bargain basement price. That line's been 3 all week. It's even dropped down to 2.5 in some places. I'm buying down to half point. If this line is at 3.5, anywhere around there. And I'm taking Atlanta in this game. Matt Ryan had 7 touchdown passes versus no interceptions in the 2 wins last year for Atlanta. This is a fair price. I like this game. I don't care that everybody's going to say, oh, wow, the Falcons are 4-13 against the spread and their last 17 games is a home favorite. Well, gee, whenever anybody cites those type of statistics, I swear to God, all you got to do is get out your abacus, your calculator, your spread book, and you'll find one on the other team that's just as negative. And here's one for you. The Packers have only covered 3 times their last 12 as a road dog. So there you go. You tell me which is the more impressive stat. To me, it doesn't matter. It's a toss-up. Again, I like the Falcons in this spot. So Atlanta's your first complimentary play. Your next complimentary play, Tampa Bay, after having its home opener postponed because of Hurricane Irma. The Buccaneers take the field today at Raymond James Stadium. And they're going to host the Chicago Bears and their one-time quarterback, the Bucs' one-time quarterback, Mike Glennon. Again, the Bears had an impressive performance at home against Atlanta last week and nearly pulled off the victory. I say it's more because the Falcons didn't play up to snuff as opposed to the Bears playing that well. Bears also suffered another loss as they lost one of their wide receivers, Kevin White, to a broken shoulder blade. He's out. Now, they already lost in week 3 of the preseason their number 1 pass catcher from a year ago, Cameron Meredith. I don't know who Mike Glennon's going to be throwing the ball to today. And this Bears team was 2-6 against the spread on the road a year ago. They've lost 8 straight road games since ironically beating Tampa Bay in December of 2015. They've never won a September game during John Fox's tenure so far. And I just think Tampa Bay is going to come out here with the extra week of preseason practice really extended here, focused, play well. Tampa has given Jameis Winston even more firepower offensively by going out and drafting tight end O.J. Howard out of Alabama, by going out and signing Deshaun Jackson, the free agent wide receiver from the Redskins, to join Mike Evans. So Winston has a lot of offensive options to turn to. The running game, obviously not that good. Everybody will say, oh, Doug Martin starting the season on the suspended list. But listen, Doug Martin hasn't been a contributor for them for 2 years. So it's going to be really in the hands of Jacquizz Rodgers and Charles Sims anyway to carry the ground game for them. Excuse me. I get choked up talking about the Buccaneers. The Tampa defense, you look at their numbers last year, not impressive. Giving up a little over 23 points a game, almost 340 yards a game. But where the Tampa defense did well is they came up with 38 sacks and they forced 28 turnovers. I think that this Chicago team will get better as the season goes on, but I think this Tampa team proved last year in the second half of the season that they're an up-and-coming team, and I like them, and I'm willing to lay the points with them here at home in their season opener. Your next game. I like the Kansas City Chiefs, minus the 5 points at home against Philadelphia. This of the complimentary plays I'm giving you would be my favorite play today. I normally would bet this game and make this my top-rated 15-dime release today instead of my other play, which if you go to the website is actually on the late game between the Raiders and the Jets. However, I'll be the first one to tell you. I'm in Philadelphia. I'm a lifelong Eagles fan, grew up in the Philadelphia suburbs. If I was to use this as my 15-dime best bet, I guarantee you I'd lose the game. It's just one of those quirky things. It never fails. Whenever I go on or against the Eagles, something bad happens. I like Kansas City. I like them for a number of reasons. I like the way the Chiefs played in their season opening win at New England. I like the way Andy Reid, who I always thought was kind of a phony when it came to being a guru of the West Coast offense, who often seemed to get too conservative when he should have opened things up. I like the way he was not conservative and he really opened things up and took the attack to Bill Belichick's Patriots in that Thursday nighter. I like the fact that the Patriots have had a couple of extra days of prep time, and don't like the fact that the Eagles are playing the second straight week on the road. I like the fact that the Eagles here are going to be shorthanded again in their secondary. You know, they went out, they traded their top wide receiver from last year to the Bills to go ahead and get Ronald Darby to shore up their weakest position over the past couple of years, cornerback. And what happens? Darby suffers an ankle injury in their opener at Washington last week. I'd like to see who's going to cover Tyreek Hill because I don't see anybody out there, and they already got problems with who's going to cover the big tight end as well, Kelsey as well. So I think Alex Smith, who has just been dynamite, in the Patriots game. Alex Smith gets his fair share of knocks. Is he a guy that can lead to the Super Bowl? I don't know. But listen, since 2001, this is a guy who has completed nearly 65% of his passes, 110 touchdowns, only 38 interceptions. And I was reading someplace that last year he had the league's fastest snap-to-release average. Take the snap, release the ball. And he has good feet, too. So this is a guy, the Eagles are going to want to put pressure on him with Jim Schwartz's defense, right? But when you get rid of the ball quickly, that puts even more pressure on the defense to put pressure on you as the quarterback. Great debut against a slow Patriots defense, 28 of 35, 368 yards, 4 touchdowns. Better debut for the Toledo rookie running back Kareem Hunt, stepping in 17 for 148 yards, 246 yards from scrimmage, 3 touchdowns for the Chiefs. This is an Eagles team that, yes, they found themselves down by 1 late in the first half at Washington, reclaimed the lead, did win the game at Washington, but 2-6 against the spread on the road last season. A team that was unable to run at Washington. Will they be able to run at Kansas City? Chiefs were poor against the ground game a year ago, but Patriots couldn't run on them. Had the big fourth quarter comeback, extra prep time. I like Kansas City minus the 5 points in this particular spot. Also note that the Eagles lost their place kicker in that season-opening win against Washington, going with a rookie here today, Jake Elliott. So I certainly think that is a hindrance as well. Your other final complimentary play today, I was going to touch the Arizona-Indianapolis game, but my God, is that a dog of a game? I'm going to take a shot with Tennessee -1 at Jacksonville. I know Tennessee has lost 3 straight games at Jacksonville. I know last year with their playoff hopes on the line, they went there, and before Marcus Mariota broke his leg, they were trailing 25-10. I'm just not a believer in the Jaguars. I'm not a believer in Blake Bortles. I'm not a believer in the fact that they won at Houston last week. I think that was more of a situation where the Texans lost that game than they won it. I know Tennessee really no-showed last week at home against Oakland, but then again, Raiders are a far superior team. I like the fact, I just like Tennessee more than Jacksonville. That's the bottom line. And, I just don't anticipate the Jaguars defense sacking Marcus Mariota 10 times like they got to Tom Savage and Deshaun Watson in week number 1. I don't think they're going to force 4 turnovers. I look at this Jacksonville offense, and, Blake Bortles only had 125 yards passing last week, and he lost his number 1 wide receiver, Allen Robinson, to a torn ACL. Is Leonard Fournette going to have another big game? He possibly could here. But this Tennessee run defense was number 2 in the league last year. I think this is going to be a close game, come down to the wire. It's a nip-and-tuck game, but I do like Tennessee to pull this one out. So, again, your complimentary plays, I like the Falcons a lot. I like the Eagles a lot. I'm going to go as well with Tampa Bay. And then the last of those selections, I'm going to go with Tennessee. And those are your free plays for this Sunday card. And we'll do it again tomorrow. Good luck, guys.